My name is Katie Groves, and I am a survivor of ritual abuse and mind control programming. In this video, I'm going to be talking about something very difficult for me to talk about. So I ask for your grace if it's a little all over the place. I'm going to be talking about my siblings. This is not something that I have spoken of on my channel as far as I can recall. And I've not spoken of it because it is so painful. But I think that there are other survivors who are dealing with similar issues, and so I want to share my story around my siblings on their behalf. Growing up in government mind control and child trafficking, my front personalities were told that we did not have any siblings, that we were an only child. And we were programmed extensively to not question or believe otherwise. But upon integrating from structural dissociation to the degree which I presently have, I have discovered that I had siblings. I may still have them, have some that are alive today, but I don't know about them. What I have learned from integration is that Monarch mind control, the dissociative programming modality which I was subjected to, relies in part on genetic memory. Dissociation is something that is passed hereditarily. It is not activated to the degree that it is in Monarch slaves without sufficient trauma, but the propensity to dissociate structurally to a high degree is apparently passed genetically. So if your parents were Monarch slaves, you will have a higher chance of being programmable as a Monarch slave yourself. And so the bloodlines of ritually abusive families who practice dissociative programming are very important to the people who perpetrate this stuff. They want people with propensities for dissociation to reproduce and to carry on their bloodlines so that they can make more viable slaves. They do not, however, want a family to have 30 children in their home, say, as that would pose obvious problems. They couldn't possibly do their jobs while raising a larger number of children. So oftentimes, in my experience, the families that I grew up around only had maybe 1 or 2 kids in the home. There were a lot of only children, quote unquote only children, being raised in the homes at least. This was so that the parents would have more time to work and could devote extra time to the individual child. This child may be their biological child, but it was a child to whom they were specifically assigned to program. And this was just in the circle in which I grew up in. There are other mind-controlled circles that operate different ways. But what I learned is that these families, these parents, while they only had 1 or 2 kids in their homes, typically, they would have a lot more kids, typically, in the underground being used as trafficked slaves. And so my family was no exception. I do not know if my mother actually carried other children and gave birth to other children. Based on my memories, I have reason to believe that her eggs were used and implanted into surrogates so that her genetic line could be carried without her having to be actually pregnant and carrying children and giving birth to children all the time. You can imagine this would pose problems if someone was continuously pregnant but didn't have any children in the home to show for it, or did not have the number of children they were obviously having to show for it. So this is something that I've learned government mind control circles do. They take bloodliners, eggs, and sperm, and they use surrogates to have children. These surrogates are often trafficked women who are considered disposable and may be used only for that purpose. And I don't even want to go into details about the exploitation I have seen done to these women while pregnant. It's unbelievable to me. So these are the circumstances under which, from what I understand, I had siblings. And the siblings I've recovered memories around so far were named Jacob, Elizabeth, Victor, and Kevin. Elizabeth was 4 years older than me. She was killed when she was 15, along with her son, Jacob, who was also our brother. I'll leave you to figure that out. I was told that she was killed because I was trying to free myself. When I was 11 years old, I attempted to deeply deprogram myself, and I succeeded in breaking through on a lot of my systems, and I presented myself to my abusers and said, "What are you going to do about it?" I did not anticipate that they would kill Jacob and Elizabeth, and I have reason to believe there were other reasons why they did this. From what I've learned from integration, Jacob, who was 3 years old, I don't know if I mentioned that, 3 years old at the time of his death, was born developmentally disabled, I assume as a result of being a child of incest. And it is common practice in the organization in which I grew up to execute children at the age of 3 if they are not determined programmable. And from what I've recovered memories of, a family member, who I'm going to choose not to mention here, who is in a high position within this group, who is in the appropriate position within the group to make this decision, decided that Jacob was not programmable, and she chose for him to be killed. And from what my alters have told me, although I have not integrated enough around this to be sure, Elizabeth, my sister, who was Jacob's mother, fell apart when she found out, or when she finally came to terms with the fact that Jacob was going to be killed. And she started protesting and refusing to be programmed to follow orders. And so it all coincided kind of perfectly. I hate using that word. Perfectly for my abusers. They were going to kill Jacob anyway. Elizabeth started fighting back. And then I fought back. Because Elizabeth and Jacob were undocumented, they could easily kill them without raising suspicion. And while they did not want to give up Elizabeth as a slave, they chose to give her up, from what I understand, in order to use it against me. And of course, because they didn't want to deal with the hassle. That I've done a lot of work around, and that I integrated around very shortly into my process. The 2 other siblings I mentioned, Victor and Kevin, I'm going to talk about in another video because I believe this one is going to time out soon. Thank you for watching. I hope this is helpful. This is so heavy. I feel like I'm pulling my heart out, but I know my story is not unique. That's why I do this. Thanks.